I've also recognized over time that there are certain elements from the way I was raised that are toxic to me and that I
Mm,
want to interrupt, right? And so, for example, in my culture, we have a definition of respect for adults that is absolute,
hmm.
that cannot be questioned, and can move into a place of being toxic, right? And
Yes.
then that respect is often, it is enforced
Yeah. Yeah.
with strict punishment, domination, yelling, intimidation, threatening, et cetera, et cetera.
Not only enforced, but from what I've seen, secondhand, sometimes misplaced. You're forced to respect something that is not respectable.
If you ask any parent, do you want your kid to grow up to be able to advocate for themselves? Do you want
Hmm.
your kid to be able to negotiate? Do you want your kid to be able to set boundaries? Do you
Hmm.
want your kid to be able to express when they're not comfortable with something? Like, of course, we want those things. And so, how do we then parent our kids in certain ways where that conversation is not available to them with the people that love them most in the world? And when my kid talks back to me, I have a surge of anger that and want to dominate, suppress that conversation. And that comes, I realize, from my own generational baggage, right?
Hmm.
And the way that I was parented, and the way that my mom was parented, and the way that my grandparents were parented, right? And so the work now is to understand that when my child is talking back to me, that I am not actually physically threatened, that
Hmm.
I can do things, engage in practices to find that space between stimulus and response, right?
But yes.
And choose a different tool than the triggered desire to dominate. Working with parents to understand that that does not mean that you don't hold authority, but you learn to hold calm power, and you learn to be able to acknowledge the need of your child while setting your own boundaries. I think is that most of us grew up being taught by our parents, and it's not universally true, but mostly, that there are some emotions that are good and some emotions that are bad. And we are rewarded for the good emotions, and we are punished or shamed for the bad emotions. And what I find is many modern or contemporary parents want to teach their kids that all emotions are valid,
Yeah.
right? Including hate, rage, lust, and not all actions are appropriate,
Right. You
right?
have
And
to
so, how do we?
recognize the emotion. You
Yes,
own the
yes,
emotion. You
yes.
acknowledge it, but then you act through the logical mind, not through stimulus and response, as you said.
Correct. And so, as parents, that requires us to show up again with calm power and say, I see that. That's okay. That will not scare me, right? Your rage will not scare me. And you can't call me the names you just called me. But that conversation comes later when we're both calm. I'm curious, Chad, that frame about right and wrong emotions. Did you experience that growing up, or did you have a different model with your parents?
I really have to commend my parents. There was really nothing in my life. Emotions are one category within everything. I was taught that there's really nothing that's black and white. There's nothing that's right and wrong. I was really brought up to understand that every decision has consequences, both positive and negative. Every action has consequences, both positive and negative. And you should understand and evaluate what the positives and the negatives are and know the ramifications of your actions before you take the action. But I was never told you can't do something, you can't feel a certain way. I really think that that's one of the most valuable things that my parents passed on to me in the way I was brought up. It's framed my perspective on my entire life across the board.
I'm a snob about pineapple. It's got to
So you
be
don't eat Dole
perfect.
from the can.
I do not. And I am definitely anti pineapple pizza and throwing a ring of pineapple on a burger and calling it a Maui burger. Like, that is just not okay in
I
any
think the greatest travesty to Hawaiian heritage is that they labeled that pizza Hawaiian pizza.
way. Yes. Across the board. Well, that and the, overthrow of the monarchy. Um,
Yeah.
so
Well, there's that too.
um,
Yeah.
there's that too.